All right, guys, we are going to go over our 3.1 guided reading notes just so you can kind of check your answers and make sure you have everything filled in. If you need to fix anything, you can do that on your document and then just resubmit it. So we're going to fill out this chart that compares and contrasts carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. So we're going to list out the elements and then we'll talk about the functions. So the elements in carbohydrate are already listed. It should be carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Protein contains carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and even some proteins include sulfur. So we will add that as well. And lipids are similar to carbohydrates. They contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Now, the functions of carbohydrates are that they are major components of cell parts, so they make up most of the cell parts. Proteins are similar. They also make up different cell structures and components, and they also make up the different organelles in cells. Then lipids, they store energy for later use, so the cell can access that lipid when it needs more energy later. And carbohydrates provide energy for cells as well, but it's a quick, short-term energy, whereas lipids, because they can be stored, they last longer. As we move down to the next section, talking about elements and compounds, question 1 is an element is any substance that cannot be broken down into simpler substances, and then its smallest unit is the atom. Question 2, when two or more elements combine chemically, they form a compound, and then its smallest unit is usually called a molecule. Most chemical reactions within cells could not take place without water. And then compounds that do not contain carbon are called inorganic compounds. Moving down to the carbohydrates section, you can reference the table at the beginning of our guided reading notes for this as well, but a carbohydrate is made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Then starch is a kind of carbohydrate. And the question is, what foods have starch? So if you look in your book, it lists out the different types of foods. So that would include potatoes, pasta, rice, and bread. If you've ever heard of the saying carb loading, this is what that means. You eat a lot of that pasta or bread, potatoes, and you get a lot of that starchy food because carbohydrates give you a lot of fast energy. Then our next question is, how do cells use carbohydrates? Cells, or the cellulose that makes up the cell wall in plants is a type of carbohydrate. And then it's also found in cell membranes. If we move on to lipids, you are listing out what examples of lipids that the book provides, and it says fat, oils, and wax. Okay, then the question, how are lipids like carbohydrates? Um, they have similar elements, so they are both made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And then lipids, like carbohydrates, are also part of cell membranes. Then your question, cells store what in lipids for later use? Cells store energy. You can also look back at that table as well um, to reference that answer and what the function is. Moving on to our proteins, question 11, you were just stating that proteins form parts of cell membranes and many of the cell's organelles. The small molecules that make up proteins are called amino acids. And then what do enzymes do? You can just provide the definition. They are a type of protein that speeds up chemical reactions in living things. And moving on to our last section, nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are the very long organic molecules that contain instructions that cells need to function. And then is the following sentence true or false? Cells use the instructions in nucleic acids to carry out all life functions. This is true. And then the two kinds of nucleic acids that are talked about briefly are DNA and RNA. Once you have these all filled in, please make sure you have this guided reading submitted. Make sure you're checking your Chapter 3 key terms as well, and then you are good to go unless you need to catch up on any other work for today. Have a good one.